Young gangs are running riot on British streets.
If we had to shoot people, we'd shoot people. If people had to die, people had to die.
Children are being shot dead and kids are taking knives to schools. It's happening on our streets right across the country. How did gang culture get so out of control? And why is the situation getting worse? I'm Raggy Omar, and I'm going in search of the violent gangs, the high-tech fraudsters, and the organised networks that are the new face of Britain's criminal underworld. 21st century gang violence has reached epidemic proportions. In 2007 alone, more than 50 children have lost their lives to gun and knife crime. The gangsters are getting younger and the level of violence is spiralling. Take Birmingham, England's second city. Gun crime here has risen a staggering 500% in the last few years, and it's a picture that's replicated across the country, with teenage gangs killing one another over tribal loyalties based on nothing more than which postcode they come from. This is the story of two postcodes in Birmingham, where a new breed of gangster has taken over and where battles over turf fueled a full-blown riot that led to a brutal double murder which shocked the nation.
Letitia was a good girl. This is as bad as it gets. A part of me died when Letitia died.
This is the heart of Birmingham, which is England's second city, and standing up here and looking down on the city centre, you're really struck by just how much money has been pumped into Birmingham. Beautiful new buildings in the heart of the city, but it's not like that throughout Birmingham. In fact, if you head off in that direction towards the Aston and Lascelles districts, you'll find two areas that have not only been racked and scarred by poverty and a real lack of opportunities, but they've also been racked by gang warfare. According to the West Midlands Police, teenage gun crime has trebled here in the last few years. I wanted to know how the gang problem was affecting young people, so I went to the B19 and B6 districts, where gang violence is endemic. Teenagers here are so scared of gang reprisals that they didn't want to show their faces on camera.
All these other youngsters that are joined these gangs, you see, for their own protection, they're carrying guns, man. If you look at them in a bad way, or if you say something in a bad way, they'll retaliate, you see.
People form more gangs to protect themselves from the new gangs, so it keeps on going and going, so it becomes gangs and gangs. There's 12-year-olds getting shot.
The gangs make much of their money from crack and heroin dealing, and they've become so bold that these dealings often take place in broad daylight on the high street. Around the country, gang territories are increasingly based around postcodes, and so-called postcode wars are believed to have been at the heart of a senseless gang-related murder in March 2007. It happened in Birmingham's busy town centre and started when two young students fell out over gang loyalties. Dwayne Barnes was a young college student, but it was a chance encounter here on New Street in the heart of Birmingham's shopping district that was to have fatal consequences. Dwayne bumped into one of his sworn enemies, and as soon as he saw him, he knew he was in trouble. Eyewitnesses say they saw him running off in that direction towards St. Philip's Cathedral with his assailants carrying a knife. Dwayne Barnes ran to this bus shelter where he must have thought he was safe, having run nearly half a mile from where the attack had begun in New Street in the centre of town. But he came out to see if the coast was clear, and again, who knows, perhaps by chance, his assailants were driving by in a car. They grabbed a hold of him and they dragged him out into this main street in the middle of the afternoon at around 3 o'clock, and they just started to stab him to death. And what makes this even more horrific is that the murder took place right under the noses of a major college building here. Dwayne Barnes died in hospital 2 days after the frenzied attack. When the case went to court in September 2007, one of his attackers, 17-year-old Michael Hales, claimed his rivalry with Dwayne was because they were in different gangs. The jury found Hales and one of his co-defendants guilty of manslaughter. A third co-defendant was convicted of murder. Michael Hales came from the B6 Aston area, which, along with B19, is among the most violent in the city. The two areas are the strongholds of the notorious gangs, the Burger Bar Boys and the Johnson crew. Their turf is divided by Birchfield Road, a dual carriageway known as Birmingham's Checkpoint Charlie. I'm going to cross the border to see how gang warfare is affecting ordinary people.
It has become more violent than it is.
Has that been from people attacking you?
Yes, yes.
And what happens? I mean, they use knives or...?
Yeah, they use knives. Knives and blades, axe, everything they use. It's like a volcano waiting to erupt.
Do they sort of rule the streets, these gangs?
Well, of course they are the ruler because they're young and they don't care about anything.
You don't get a sense of a sort of police sort of presence?
They are not afraid of God. How can they be afraid of police?
We're headed just down to what is effectively the border between Lozells, the area just back there, and Aston. And if you're from Lozells and you cross this border and go into Aston, you're likely to get attacked. It seems amazing that you have something that most people around here do regard as a kind of unofficial border. It's almost between sort of Palestinians crossing into Israeli areas and vice versa. There is a very strong sense in which, you know, you belong in one area, not into another, and that the two sides are enemies. We're going through the underpass now, which is the official border. We've had a lot of knifings, a lot of shootings, and people affected on this side in Aston just as much as they have been in Lozells. And again, victims all of the so-called postcode violence and postcode gangs. The government's own crime survey estimates that some 60,000 people are stabbed or knifed in the UK every year, the equivalent of 160 a day, and that many of the attackers and the victims are teenagers. I wanted to know why more and more of our young people are involved in gang-related street crime, so we spoke to Tony, who's been a gang member for most of his life. He puts it down to a combination of peer pressure and the need to belong.
You know, I came from a broken home, family on a low income, one-parent family, no money, wanted what every normal child had, decent pair of trainers and clothes. Family couldn't provide that, so I ended up on the streets looking for it for myself from round about the age of 10, 11.
Tony's views on the motives of young gangsters are chilling and sad.
The media portrays, unless you're wearing new clothes with fashion labels, unless you're driving a brand new car, then you're almost excluded from society unless you have these accessories. And without these accessories, you feel like an outcast in society. The power has been taken away from the people by the government, so you make your own power, and your own power is normally drugs, guns, and money. If we had to shoot people, we'd shoot people. If people had to die, people had to die, and that's just the way it was.
And even behind bars, the gang violence can be deadly. According to Tony, warders at Birmingham's Winson Green prison remain fearful of violence breaking out between inmates associated with the rival Burger Bar Boys and Johnson crew.
If you'd maybe come into Winson Green prison, at reception you'd be asked if you're a Johnny or you're a Burger. And depending on your answer would depend on what wing you went on. They never mixed on the same wing, because if they had mixed them on the same wing, then the violence would have been instantaneous. Your Johnnies and your Baps were forever, it seems, trying to kill each other over status. I mean, I've witnessed firsthand the depth of hatred between two rival gangs.
This hatred has been fueled by turf wars over crack cocaine dealing and heightened by the emergence of firearms. Eventually, this feud between the rival gangs culminated in a shocking double murder. There had been tit-for-tat attacks between the two gangs over a number of years because of rivalry over the drugs trade in their areas. But it all came to a head when an associate of the